Yo, the kids official sliding on the instrumental. Nordic combos, twist your mental like forbidden.
Peace to the public and power to the people.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. But what you can do is join us in conversation here, where the vulnerable are powerful.
Church.
And where the most gangster thing you can do is serve. Welcome to All the Way Live.
Absolutely welcome everybody to the All the Way Live show. My brother Miles and I do this show weekly. Weekly we do this show where we bring you guys that carefully curated content for your cranium. You know, we dedicate ourselves as activists, as entrepreneurs, as students, and we just look for the dopest topics that we can talk about that are relevant in today's day and age, and then dedicate ourselves to finding out what information we can give you so you can sound smart around some of your friends. You know, maybe impress one of them cute girls that you've been looking at. Because I don't know if you know this, Miles Xavier, but there are now more women in universities than there are men.
Word? Shout out to the ladies out there, the educated ladies, you know? That's a beautiful thing.
Love to see it. We love to see it. So if you got one that you're trying to impress, this is the show for you, man. And absolutely anybody else is welcome to the show. We have been doing this thing for 106 episodes. We do it for a host of reasons, but no reason is more important than the fact that we know that people are going through it, man. We know that loneliness is at an all-time high. We know depression is at an all-time high. We know that sometimes, man, you just need a little bit of energy just to get you through the week. And sometimes we do this show completely for y'all. Well, we always do this show completely for y'all. And sometimes we do that just so we can have enough energy to get through the week, man. So this week is one of those exciting times where it's for not just us, but for you guys as well. Welcome. Without further ado, let's get into the show, Miles Xavier. What we saying?
Well, before we get into what we're saying, let me kindly tell the people where we're saying it from. The UK is in the building. Shout out to our producer Hassan on the ones and twos, making sure that everything looks, sounds, and flows like it's supposed to. Can't do this thing without you, brother. No doubt. Love to you, Zway and SA, holding it down. You know what I'm saying? No, matter of fact, Namibia today, ain't it?
I'm in the desert. I'm sweating, hot. I got my studio equipment. This is the All the Way by Any Means Necessary show.
No doubt. And that's how you know we getting raw and gritty. You know what I'm saying? Zway is doing his best impersonation of Will Smith in Emancipation. You got the sweat going. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's real. The gray shirt, you know, But we through the struggle, through the wire.
Don't compare me to Will Smith. Don't compare me to Will Smith.
Have you seen Emancipation yet?
Hell no, I haven't seen Emancipation.
Have
you
seen
Emancipation?
No, I haven't.
And if you've seen Emancipation, drop freedom in the comments.
Yeah, no, but a more refreshing take on history is the one that we always include in this show when we tell you that Chicago is in the building and that this show is recorded on stolen land. This land was cared for by the Potawatomi people, the Council of the Three Fires, and the violence done to remove those indigenous First Nations people from this land is inseparable from the violence that we see in this city today, this country today, and this world today. So what we do is we lift up love for Black and brown people the world over. We lift up love for indigenous people the world over. We shout them out and support those communities in every way that we can. And one of those ways is that making sure that we don't let the intro be over until y'all hear that. But now that you have, let's get into the show.
Yeah, I get that. But is we live though? Is we like all the way live though? You heard?
Like we said at the top of the show, man, Miles Xavier, my brother, is an activist. He's a community organizer. He's a servant to the people. I myself am an activist, an impact creative, and our brother Hassan, together, all of us have dedicated our lives and our goals towards serving our communities. That's a big part of this show. And we like to say that this show is where impact meets art. Impact meets art. That's exactly what we're doing. Part of that impact that we do is we run a foundation. So far, man, we got about 7, 8 different orphanages and community centers that are getting food on a weekly basis. We've handed out close to 7 million. Miles, do you ever think about that number? 7 million meals that we've handed out. Do you ever like actually think about it?
It's hard to wrap your brain around, you know. But it's a number where I think the impact is undeniable. If you've ever had the privilege to be a part of handing that resource, handing a meal, a plate over to somebody, you know how deeply that can affect somebody. So it's hard for me to scale that up to 7 million, but it's humbling to have been a part of it.
It's a bit crazy, and like I'm not even gonna front. Sometimes, and the cool thing about doing this sort of work is that you think that you're giving food when in fact you're receiving food, like, and you're receiving so much more. Anytime you're in this space and you're giving, you're receiving so much more. Ooh, and shout out to our producer for pulling up a picture of myself with one of our volunteers, Alfred Buena, who has been instrumental in the delivery of all of those millions of meals. He dedicates his truck to be able to take that food for us and take it to orphanages and whatnot, man. So it cannot be done without volunteers. And so for us, we just like to highlight this and let people know that if you're in the Chicago area or if you're in the South Africa area and you do want to be a part of this impact and you do want to help move food around, help donate tech products into kids, and even if you just want to understand a little bit more about how we do, you definitely gotta holler at us, man. We're so passionate about this, and it's happening. It's happening.
Yo, it's happening in a major way. And in case I, for my part, have not been clear enough on how we can make this happen, right? Hit us up, slide in the DMs, you know what I'm saying? Reach out to us via the show, uh, chat us. And literally, I had somebody hit me earlier this week say that lives in an apartment complex. They're saying, yo, there's a couple of families that I know could use a couple of boxes of groceries. Is there any way you can help them out? I've seen what y'all do. And I was like, can do. And that was within 1 week, we were able to add those 4 families to our list of deliveries and get food into those homes. So y'all out there in community, it literally takes one message to us to let us know who they are, where they at. We don't even need too many details. You know what I'm saying? We don't need no last names. We just need addresses and to know that they're in need, and we can make that happen. So any of y'all out there that are in either the Chicago area, the Joburg area, any of the places that we move around, you are one message away from literally bringing food to people's door. So we appreciate everybody that has reached out to be a part of that, and we encourage anybody that even a thought, even hey, so and so that I live next door to, down the block from, that I see might be interested in this. Please hit us up, because what happens when people receive that is amazing and beautiful.
Sometimes, like, I know personally, whenever I'm in like a very very low place and I'm out of energy or I'm just dejected, I definitely go about and help people, and almost immediately I know that I'm going to be filled back in, and that fulfillment, it just lasts me for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we've talked on this show a few times about the different stories we hear in our journey of helping people, and you get so much perspective when you just front line and you just sit down and you speak to people like your Mama Rose at the Fountain of Love orphanage, or you speak to Mama Buche, who's in the Young Women Christian Association in Dube, and they look at you and they tell you like, yo, you don't understand, even just this bread you're bringing here is changing somebody's life, is really changing somebody's life, and it means everything to them. Like, this is what they look forward to. So we like to share that joy. We don't want to hold that joy. We like to open that up. So like Miles says, definitely just hit us up. Just hit us up. I had a call this week. They were like, yo, we have all this kitchen equipment. What can we do with it? I said, I know exactly to do with it. Bring it through. It's that simple.
It is. It really is. And there's multiple ways to get involved, right? Earlier this week, in addition to our food deliveries, I also got hit up by the pantry that said, "Hey, we have some extra furniture, some tables and chairs." One of the folks that comes to the pantry was has a few kids and just didn't have no furniture in the crib. So made a few calls to say, "Hey, who's got a free morning to come do a little bit of heavy lifting?" And to see those kids, their excitement, to see the relief on mom's face when we came through unloading couches and chairs, a dining room set was incredible and amazing. So we often put the call out on this show where, well, one thing, if we're good at one thing, we are good at making a lot out of a little. So whether it's used technology, whether it's used furniture, or whether it's just a need that you recognize in your network, chances are we could do something with it, something real with it. So yeah, man, hit that line.
One of the cool things, actually, recently is that I was working with I got a working through a project with the UN in Namibia, right? And it's part of a consortium which is Impact Tank, and Impact Tank is a venture accelerator. So they take impact driven projects and startups, and then they push them through the accelerator, and then they help them scale. And one of the cool things that I'm realizing as I'm looking at how the UN operates and how Impact Tank operates, both very highly esteemed organizations, is that even at those levels, we're all moving off the same impulse of wanting to help, and we're all figuring it out as we go along. So part of the myth, I think, about like what it looks like or takes to help people is that you have to have an organization, or you have to have a foundation registered, or do all these like it looks very daunting, when in truth it's actually always a lot more simple than it looks like. And sometimes it is really just a call to Miles Xavier and to Zoe and be like, hey yo, I got hands to help, what can I do?
No doubt, man. I appreciate you breaking down some of the myths and misnomers around service. And I think another one is that you're either on one side of the ball or the other, right? And something that you kind of helped me break down over this summer was actually I was all up in the pantry, you know what I'm saying, handing out the food, giving all the hugs. But whenever they would be like, we've served pretty much everybody, we got the surplus, why don't you take a little something home? I was very hesitant to do that, right? And what you said to me was, brother, you're in this space giving so much of yourself. People are trying to give to you, right? And when you act sheepish around that, right? When you turn that down because of some misplaced sense of you're not here to receive, you're here to give, you're blocking other people from getting that giving off. You know what I'm saying? And that is something that since the moment you said it to me, I've carried it with me, not only in the pantry space, but in every space that I've been in, making sure that, I'm not blocking other people's opportunities to give to me.
That's a great way to put it, because like imagine if we pulled up to the pantry or pulled up to one of our orphanages, they're like, nah, we good, we good, and turn us around at the door. We would feel very hurt by that. But I think also a part of it is it's not with bad intention. It's difficult to be able to take things, especially in that setting, because you feel like you have so much in abundance, which and you want to be able to help give, and the people that you're giving to need even that which is being offered to you. So you feel almost uncomfortable taking. But and this is something that Deep Chopra says, is that a big part of being able to give and have the energy to give is being open to receiving, and not just receiving in order to fulfill yourself, but also giving other people a chance to feel that same fulfillment. So instead of looking at receiving things as you taking it, look at it as you giving somebody an opportunity to feel the same type of fulfillment that we feel when we give.
Hmm. No doubt, man. No doubt. I want to take that word receiving, kind of stretch a transition into another conversation about an event that I was a part of earlier this week. But anything else, any other notes or comments on what's been going on with Mandulo or the pantry side?
Yo, we're in Namibia this time around, y'all. If you're in Namibia and you know of people that have access food that they're willing to be able to hand out, or are part of a youth led or a youth focused impact initiative, please do hit me up. We're trying to make some big impact moves over here in the city. You know where to find me at.
No doubt, no doubt. So on that topic of receiving, right? I had the opportunity to be a part of an event earlier this week in Chicago. Like, one of the closest neighboring suburbs is Evanston. Evanston is also home to Northwestern University. Some of y'all might recognize that name. Pretty prestigious school. But in the community of Evanston, one of their aldermen, which is like a mini mayor for a small district, Miss Robin Rue Simmons, actually got the first local reparations bill passed in Evanston, I think earlier last year. And there was a documentary that they filmed about the process of her getting that bill through. A really, really dope documentary. It's available for free via PBS. We want to share that link with y'all. We'll either drop it in the chat or add it to the description. But if you just look up The Big Payback documentary, you'll be able to find that. It's free on PBS's website. And it was incredibly moving for a lot of reasons. Shout out to Hassan for pulling that up. And so I just wanted to, it dawned on me, right, that as my brother, from all the spaces that you lived, and from, a different perspective outside of the US, what do you think about reparations? What does that word make you think of? What's your perception of it?
When I hear reparations, I always take it in like the U.S. terms, in the sense of like how Americans would describe reparations, and usually it's under the guise of pay us back what you owe us, right? There's that, but when there's that lens, and then when I take it a step further and I internalize it, I think about the estimated $4 trillion that the British Empire took from India. I think about the $8 trillion that was taken between Africa and the islands, right? So for me, the concept of reparations, I think, is just like very widespread, and I think it starts with a few things. And we're seeing a lot of people already like reach back for their museum artifacts, right? We saw in Chad they would get, and in Nigeria they were like, those artifacts are ours. Actually, those are stolen. Bring them back. So the idea of reparations is a lot more fluid in my head, but it does seem that the manner in which it's being requested for in the US has always been very difficult for people to think it's actually going to happen. Um, what did this documentary tell you about it? Is reparations even actually possible in this day and age?
So reparations is certainly possible, and it can look like a variety of different things, right? As you alluded to, it can look like the returning of artifacts that have been taken and then museumed up somewhere else. It can look like cash payments, which is, I think, what a lot of people initially think of is money is owed. There are giant gaps in wealth between oppressed and oppressing populations. So money that can kind of help to bridge those gaps. But it can also look like programs, housing programs, education programs. It can look like acknowledgement, right? One of my favorite frames for reparation is called the ARC model, which starts with acknowledgement, what happened, who took from who, and when, right? Repair or redress. So there needs to be another exchange of resources and goods to account and acknowledge that. And then closure. What does it look like to put in place systems of educating young people about why all of this had to happen and to prevent it in the future? So reparations is absolutely possible. This documentary is really dope because it takes on a lot of different perspectives about reparations, right? Including people that are all for it and all the way against it, both within and outside of the Black community, within and outside of the communities that reparations are being advocated for. And so with all of those lenses in mind, I think this is a really good introduction to that idea of what that looks like at the local level, as well as what that can look like at the federal government level, and just hearing a variety of perspectives on it. The other incredible thing that's dope about this documentary is that we see Miss Simmons in this fight as she's organizing, and then COVID hits, right? And then there's this racial reckoning that starts to happen around the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And watching this documentary as an organizer, as a community oriented person, it was really crazy to see how hard she's working and then how hard things got. And I think we went from being in the middle of it to really wanting it to be over. But to see it in the documentary was a reminder of how much we went through during lockdown, during quarantine, and how much of an emotional struggle we had going on, looking at all the things that were happening in the world in terms of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. And it was just a reminder that we've been through a lot. And I don't know if we've fully taken the time to heal from that. So this documentary captures all of that. And the fact that it's free 99, I think means there's no excuse not to go check that out.
Man, before that, and leading right into what we went through as part of COVID and what we went through, it actually takes us right. It's a great transition into our next topic, which is the fact that people are really losing trust in media, right? There's been a huge mistrust in media. So, Miles Xavier, thank you for giving us that impact spotlight. Do check out that documentary about reparations. You know what I mean? Without further ado, a lot to talk about. Let's get into this. So I'm gonna paint a setting for us right quick. I'm gonna bring the listeners into a bit of the background of how the show is put together. We get together for our pre-production show during the week, and we think to ourselves, what is happening in the news? What do we need to speak about, right? And we usually go through news sources. We go through a whole bunch of different things, and it's just getting increasingly more difficult for us to be able to tell actually what to believe in the news and what not to believe in the news, right? That's becoming a lot more difficult. So, in part of that journey, I actually stumbled across a Washington Post, controversial, but a Washington Post article that said, to regain trust, the news media needs objectivity, right? And it speaks about how in the 1970s, 70% of Americans said that they trusted the mass media a great deal or fair amount to report on news fully, accurately, and fairly. The figure now stands at 34%. Other polls report similar findings, showing that news trust is the lowest out of all 46 countries surveyed within the US. However, we're still seeing that the West, specifically the US, has a huge control on what the media reports on. There'll be things that are happening, and you ask yourselves, how come that's happening and something else is not happening? For example, we saw the earthquake in Turkey and in Syria. Tens of thousands of people have died, but we're still, the news cry about that is very, very, very low compared to perhaps Je suis Charlie, which was the Charlie Hebdo attack in France in 2014. So it was very interesting for us to be able to actually gauge the fact that why don't we really trust the media very, very much, and how do we actually know what's going on?
Yeah, I would be really interested to see what's the why behind that, because it's one thing to say a news story is presented, either you take it at face value, you think it's correct, or you think it's not. But what's the thing that's making people feel like the news was wrong, right? Is it a conflicting headline or piece of information from a different media source? Is it something that they're experiencing out in the world? Is it a conflict between what they see on media that's in traditional forms like newspaper and like the news on TV versus what's coming up in social media and on our feeds? What is the thing that's making them say, oh, the news was wrong, or oh, I was lied to, or oh, that's inaccurate? And why is that second piece being believed over the initial thing that they read? That's kind of where my brain immediately goes,
Yeah, I'll tell you where it started for me. I think the Trump election was the first. Man, we hitting all trifectas of conversation. We talk about reparations. We talk about Trump. we, we're knocking down all the hot topics
Yeah,
here.
we should have threw a
But
trigger warning at the beginning of this one.
but with the with the Trump election, I think that's when we're really exposed to what the media was reporting to be a proposed landslide of a victory, and then that didn't happen. Trump came in, and then we started seeing almost an obsessive focus from the media's perspective on Trump, to the point where even things that were happening around the world were quite insignificant at that time, right? And it was quite alarming, because during that same period you're asking yourself, okay guys, I get the fact that Trump is a controversial president, but at what place do we weigh what's important to talk about and what not to talk about? And then it kind of like moves even into, we get into the Ukraine war right now. The war is terrible, death of people is terrible. I don't have to explain that. But also at the same time as the Ukraine war, Ethiopia has 105,000 people that have died last year, but that's not being spoken about. Myanmar has 20,000 people that died last year, but that's not necessarily being spoken about. So it kind of forces you to ask yourself, like, is it the fact that maybe it's brown and black bodies that are dying that makes it difficult, that the news decides not to be able to report on it? Why is that the case? Why are you celebrating?
I get hype whatever you call folks out for not giving the proper respect to brown and black bodies. That my guy. Yes. I know that's hard for you. So I appreciate whatever you bring that to the
Why is that
forefront.
hard for me? Why would you say that's hard for me?
I mean, I think you as yourself could give a better reasoning for why sometimes that's difficult. But I think you are somebody who, whenever presented with a scenario, circumstance, crisis, I think you like to break it down into you'll remove emotion out of it and say, what are the incentive structures that has led everybody to this point? And I think you have a tendency to want to humanize all sides, and if not even from a place of human curiosity, understand the motivations that can lead people to have such differing opinions on the same topic. Where often when I see anything going on at the expense of brown and black people, I go, prove it's not racism to me, and then we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Uh, I
I don't
appreciate
jump. I
that.
don't pull the races. I don't pull for the racism gun very often, right? I try not to do that, and I do want to be as objective as possible, which is quite ironic, right? Because going back to the Western monopoly on control, I was I like to think that I'm maybe on the extreme side of objective when it comes to the war in Ukraine, because I generally find it a bit difficult to be able to distinguish what the true reason behind the war is anytime the US is involved in that war. So I try, that's where my objectivity comes into place. And I try, I'm very slow with this gun, so that's my take on it. But I do know for a fact that you don't agree with that.
Um, well, there's a few things here, so I wanna kind of parse out a few arguments that I think are like distinct, right? One is media coverage, news coverage that is wrong, right? Reporting facts that are not facts, reporting things that turn out not to be true. And some of that is rooted in bias, and some of that is just rooted in straight up misinformation, right? So there's reporting things that are wrong. And then, kind of next to that, but not exactly the same, is choosing to report on certain things, certain people, certain areas of the world, and emphasizing them more than you report on other people, other communities, other areas of the world, right? Maybe you're not reporting anything that's factually incorrect, but you're reporting on something. There could be two very similar circumstances going on, and you give a lot more attention to one than to the other, right? And so I think we can kind of take those one at a time and break those down. But we already arrived at the conversation that we've had a few times off air, and I just want to give. I like how you brought in pre-pro and how we pick these topics. I want to give the people a little bit of additional context around this. Y'all, Zway is my best friend, right? And I think that's important
in the world,
in the whole world, right? And I think that's important for this segment because what y'all are about to see is the result of a very specific type of disagreement that can really only be shared between really good friends, right? It often starts with a statement or a take. Sometimes that's a hot take. And then that take is met with enthusiastic disagreement from that real good homie, right? And you're effectively told that you're tripping. So now,
forget all that. Miles, you tripping?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon, right, when somebody is told that they tripping, that they double down. But between best friends, there's a very specific type of double down that I have coined the vendetta down, right? And a vendetta down is when all time limits on the disagreement are removed and where the person who provided the hot take continues to pull evidence to back their opinion for months and sometimes years after the original take.
Okay. I know over the last couple of months since we've had this argument in person, I have been researching heavily and sending you things. But it's important for me because, like, as a non-American, you need to understand my view of the US's involvement in war is one that is almost entirely of the US having a nefarious relationship with the country that they're in. A study from Harvard showed that over half of conflicts that the US has participated in have to some extent a relation to oil, right? Over half of the wars that the US has participated in, there has been an economic an economic benefit from oil towards the US, right? And now you can look at Syria, you look at Syria, you look at Iran, you look at Iraq, you look at the Gulf War, you look at Afghanistan, bro. It's almost entirely, So when in relation to Ukraine and how this and how this argument for us started, is that I said, dude, I think that what's happening in Ukraine, I think that people dying across the border are definitely wrong. But if the US is involved in the war, I definitively cannot say that Ukraine is innocent in this instance because there's so much happening in it. Before the war started, or before this particular stage of the war started, Joe Biden's son being employed within Ukraine, and I was saying, bro, that's not a coincidence. That shows already that there is some relationship that's pulled. And then you see that the US has expensed close to $100 billion, almost the most amount of money that's been given in foreign aid towards a war. And then you ask yourself, why would that be the case when, going back to the list that we have said, Ethiopia has put up very high numbers as well in conflict. Why this particular conflict? So that's my stance on it.
Yeah. And I respect that stance. And it's actually really interesting to me because it's like there's a two sides of the same coin thing that goes on here, where I think it's actually a very similar mechanism of thought that makes me go, in the United States or Western world, Black and brown people receiving the short end of the stick. This is this is a continuation of the racist legacy of some of these Western countries, right? But I stop short of being at that point where if the US is involved in a conflict, I can't tell who's right and wrong. So I actually think there's something very similar in our belief system, but it breaks down in different ways because there are several statements that are very close to what you're saying that I agree with, right? Anytime the US is involved in conflict or crisis, they are there to protect their own interests. I believe that, right? I don't believe there's a selflessness to the way that the US engages in foreign policy, right? Anytime the US is involved in a conflict or crisis, they are often dishonest about their motivations, right? I don't think we get full transparency from the US or a lot of Western countries when we're playing on an international stage, right? I also think that decisions made by the US in times of conflict and crisis often come back to bite us and the world, right, in the ass because of the decisions that they make. And I often think that in times of conflict and crisis, the US and Western countries often make the wrong decisions. But I disagree that simply US involvement, as shady as the motivations might be, I don't believe that US involvement always eliminates my ability to examine the factors and circumstances that created a conflict and determine whether I think either side's use of force is justified. Does that make
That's very
sense?
fair. It does make sense, and I'll throw you some more facts that make me disagree with that, right? Which is, for instance, you look at the relationship that Ukraine, NATO, and Germany all had prior to the war happening, right? To a certain extent, some might even say that they were aggressing and pushing towards the Russian borders, trying to take on some towns within the northern parts of Ukraine that even those towns consider themselves Russian. So if I'm going in and I'm saying I'm liberating somebody that identifies as somebody else, that's me encroaching. And then even prior to that, there have been many instances of war where the Ukraine was even bombing people within the northern regions in Russia, or within the northern regions in Europe, in northern regions of Ukraine close to Russia. So to draw the line, especially where the media tells us to start caring, is the part for me that becomes very, very difficult to be able to say, yeah, I see that war is bad and I see people are dying, but just because the U.S. media is telling me that Ukraine is right and Russia is wrong, I'm not gonna believe that. I cannot believe that until I'm fully informed. And then you start to get deeper into the different connecting influences that have even brought this war to be where they are. And then you also realize that this is a war that has been happening for many, many years back. To definitively just go through the line of a media house that I do know, or media system that I do know is very susceptible to misinforming us for their own personal gain, where the people of that country don't even trust the media to give them the correct news, where objectivity does not exist. Then yeah, when I see that Ukraine is bombing Russia and then I see the president of Ukraine on GQ, I'm going to question that heavily. I'm going to question that heavily.
Well, I think there's a few different, again, a few different issues there, right? Like the conflation of, is a time when your country's at war an appropriate time to be on the cover of GQ, is a question, but I don't think it necessarily is evidence that the Ukraine is equally in the wrong as a country invading them in this moment.
Can I
And I
can not to interject, right? Like, let me ask you this, right? We see that there's been, when the US has a candidate or a person that they want to be able to champion through media, there is a huge push for that person, right? We saw that in Hillary Clinton. We saw that with Joe Biden. We're seeing it, right? When there's a person that the media goes, this is our darling. This is who we want to push forward. They'll push them forward, despite their transgressions, despite their past history. They'll push them forward. Now, with that, if that same media vehicle is choosing people like the Ukrainian president or whatever the case to push forward, do you what line of objectivity do you draw between what you're being given as from the news and what you believe to be true? Where do you draw that line of objectivity?
Well, I guess I'm struggling with, what do you mean by where do I draw the line of objectivity? But I'll respond to that the best way that I can, and then I'll let you kind of clarify the question. As a Black man in America, I think I always go into any news story that's being pushed on a massive scale by Western media, and I take it with a grain of salt, right? I think I'm understanding what are our options in terms of receiving news, right? Just to throw out some big names in the US, you've got CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, you've got the Washington Post, right? You've got these media entities, and each of these entities has a specific bias, right? So I think it's understanding that each of those has a bias. Now, which of those biases do I think I can account for and still pull out what are actual facts, oftentimes related to numbers and statistics, and then compare that to other places that who also, I don't know if I believe a truly objective media source exists anywhere. But I think the best that I can do is understand the biases of all the different media sources that I'm aware of, right? Filter what they're telling me through my knowledge of those biases, and then compare what are the facts that seem to hold up across each of these news medias, right? Across each of these platforms. And having implemented that system of interpreting news for several years, as long as I've felt like, news was consuming news was a big part of my day or my job or how I want to make sense of the world, I've slowly built a hierarchy in my brain, which can always be revisited and examined, but of saying, typically, when this media outlet presents a piece of information, I can often verify it even across other media outlets that don't share their same bias. And the more often I can verify that fact, the more reliable that news source becomes to me. Not completely reliable, not objective, but it becomes more valuable to me because over time, they've consistently been verifiable through other sources that don't share their bias. So I would turn that question back to you and ask you, where do you draw the line of objectivity, and what are the news sources that make you feel confident in saying, now I have the true information versus what was presented to me by some of those broader Western popular sources?
I want to say, first of all, brother, you are very wrong in saying that there's no news media source that is not biased, because you're on a show right now where it's as objective as it gets, baby. We give you that unbiased truth. You know what I'm saying? That's what this show's
I
about.
think Zoe
But
tries. I'm
honestly,
rooting for everybody black. I am biased, fam. I am biased, yo. I'm biased. No doubt. But I hope that everybody watching this that listens to us, that enjoys and engages with us, knows my heart, knows where I'm coming from, knows that bias will only go so far and won't go past the line of obscuring other things I know to be facts, but I don't even consider myself unbiased.
That's very honest, dog. That's very honest. And I think that type of honesty is something that media needs to be able to instill in themselves, right? Um I think there needs to be it, and one thing I like a lot about the show is that even if we can have a conversation like this, we always love talking about the solutions, about the options and things like that, right? And I think one of the solutions going for media, and I'd love to hear what you think as well about this, is that they need to disclose who their funders are. I think they need to disclose media needs to take an open source approach. News media needs to take an open source approach in how in sharing their own biases. I think they need to be able to be more explicit about that. And also, I think the rise of independent media is something that we're going to see increase significantly. And what I worry about is that it's just going to take us to a place where everybody we're going from four big echo chambers, right? Trump is wrong, Obama's right, Palestine is a victim, Israel's right. Like there's four echo chambers. Kanye is the saint, Kanye is the antichrist. There's 6 different chambers that people exist in.
Shout out Wu-Tang.
But I think it's gonna break.
Go on, man. 36 chambers. I'm with you. My bad.
Perfect. That was perfect. But I think we each gonna get just like trapped into these into smaller and smaller echo chambers, man. And we're already seeing it with like all these different groups that people are joining, man. And that's what scares me about where we're headed towards. I don't know if we can ever find a point where we're all drinking from the same single line of truth. But I do fear that fracture is what is going to be the consequence of the news media being the way it is right now.
And I think one of the big dangers about those echo chambers is the extremity of it. So I think my biggest beef with any time the US is involved in a conflict, I can't tell who's right or wrong, is that it's an absolute, right? So I think even if you want to argue that the United States has had corrupt intentions in every single instance of foreign intervention, I would still argue that that doesn't make every nation to ever have received aid from the US a corrupt co-conspirator. And I would also say that because Western media is lifting someone up but has often lifted up people that are problematic, I don't think that automatically anybody that they're lifting up is somebody that is corrupt. And so I think the what we need to do in breaking out of those echo chambers is be willing to take in information from different places. And I love what you said about independent media. A lot of the news sources that I trust the most, I can't put any that are international on the level as some of the ones that I trust locally, because international media conglomerates have a bottom line. They got to make some money. They got to make some bread. And often they're in spaces online and on TV where they have to compete with entertainment. So they have this whole incentive structure to put things out in a way that is more sensational, to put things out in a way that doesn't make people want to click away, because otherwise they lose the money that allows them to function. And so I think knowing that means that there's a grain of salt that has to be taken with all of them. But I think to immediately dismiss any piece of information or any person you see being lifted up because they're being lifted up by a media source that is biased, I don't think leaves us with many places to take information. So support your local news stations, support sources of information that aren't as deeply tied to the bottom line of revenue and keeping you watching, that have some type of way of putting the information and the sharing of that information first. And always be willing to have conversations and keep yourself surrounded with people that don't agree with you or don't take news in from the same places that you take in. And that's one of the most valuable things about our dynamic and our back and forth is, at the end of the day, I never question whether you care about people, whether you care about lives, whether you care about peace, right? And we might be informed from different places and come together to have conversations about those in ways in which we disagree. But I always respect you as a source of news and as a source of information, because I know where your heart is and what your incentive structure is and what moves you. So the more you can find out about who's informing you and what drives them, the better off you'll be.
Hey, man. Appreciate that, man. We handled that well. That went a lot more calm than how we handled in person. If you were in the room that day, I think the conclusion was fine in. I think that's how we ended it. But this time around, it's a lot more calm, man. And I know that we got a whole host of topics to be able to get into our next segment. Something that we like to call quick hits, where we take questions and comments from y'all. Producer, you know what to do, dog.
Yo.
Damn.
Yo. Anytime anybody pits Beyonce and Rihanna against each other, it gets spicy. But in this one, who had the better pregnancy reveal?
For the listeners.
Who had the better pregnancy reveal show, Beyonce or Rihanna?
Beyonce, it's not even close.
Remind me what
Beyonce's not even close.
event Beyonce's pregnancy reveal was at.
Beyonce, I think it was either the American Music Awards or it was the Grammys. That's the iconic rubbing the belly at the end of the performance. You know, to be fair, like you can't compare pregnancies at all. But the way the Rihanna Rihanna looked great up on that stage and floating and was very, you know, very stationary, very minimal movement. I think I saw Beyonce do a backflip. Maybe I think I think she did a backflip. She,
Yo, pregnant backflip is crazy inside or outside of any context. But if that did indeed happen, then I think we got to give it. I think we got to give it to Beyonce.
I hit us with that next one, bro. Hit us with that next one. Controversial. Have you heard about this? I like this. The next quick hit is thoughts on Adidas running back to Ye. So some articles are floating around that Adidas and Ye are getting to a certain agreement to be able to sell the last remaining inventory of Ye apparel, apparently valued at the sum of close to $500 million. Obviously, that controversial fallout. What you think about this?
This one actually is very. This one seems real simple to me. This is a classic case of like, y'all broke up, but he still got shit over your house, right? And in order for both of y'all to move on, he got to come get it, right? Y'all broke up, never want to talk to you again. Fine, never want to talk to you again. But it's mad hoodies and hats and all sorts of stuff. And Adidas spent a couple of weeks looking at all that gear and was like, yeah, you know, we could still rock it. It's our stuff. You know what I'm saying? We can make that work, but nah. So they eventually had to call up Ye. We're leaving you for real. Come get your stuff. And so that's how I see this, right? I think there's too much merchandise still floating around for Adidas to take an L on all of it. And the only way to handle that is to begrudgingly say, "Yay, come back over here just for the time it takes for us to get all this stuff out of here." Now, we all know what can happen during that visit to pick up your stuff.
I was about to say.
Take it from there.
I was about to say. Hey man, listen. Many relationships have been renewed from I need to come pick up hoodie. So that just might have been the case right here. I need to pick up my hoodie, and now you're back in it. Now you're back in it.
It's one of those moments. It's one of those moments. Because if Ye shows up, yeah, let me just get these shoes. I was tripping. That's my bad. You know, whatever y'all need to do. Yeah, you know, yeah. There's a finesse to be had here. There's a door that's still open. But it'll be interesting to see what Adidas does. This will definitely be, and whatever happens to Kanye next will definitely be an important chapter, I think, as we look back 10, 20 years from now on this moment of cancel culture. And was anybody really canceled? How deeply did it ever really affect anybody's career? How much did it actually completely stop and halt anybody from doing business? This will be how Adidas moves after this and how the sales go, I think, will be an important data point for cancel culture.
It's going to be exciting for sure. It's going to be okay. Man, it's live in weird times. Weird times. But what is being revealed is that at the end of the day, the bottom line is what matters the most. Bottom line over everything is what I'm seeing. No matter what, how Adidas feels, no matter, the bottom line is everything at the end of the day.
Kinda, unless you get locked all the way up, right? They just threw, I think, another 15 years on top of R. Kelly's sentence. It ain't looking like that man's getting out anytime soon, right? They just threw some additional years on Harvey Weinstein's sentence. So if it goes to the legal place, right, then I actually think there is an argument to be made that people's careers are ending when they're being exposed for doing something that's actually against the law. But when it's just some offending someone, I think that route to return is often quicker than it feels like it could be while they're being canceled.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's perfect, man. I like that. I think we have time for one more quick hit before we get into the last segment of the show, man. Ketamine.
Drugs.
Huh. The thoughts on alternative.
I'm gonna let you take this one, player.
They switched that up on us quick. they switched it up. Favorite country you ever traveled to? They switched that up on us quick. I'll take that. I'll take that. Favorite country ever traveled to? It just might have to be, and Cape Town, South Africa doesn't count, right?
Yeah, home country is not allowed, player.
Oh, damn. He explains it right there. Home country's not allowed. Okay, cool, man. If I had to think about it, it's tough. We once took a trip to, it was either Grenada or it was somewhere in the islands, man. Grenada, Barbados, those types of places, man. Incredibly scenic, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places.
Fortunately for you, I can throw SA up on the board on both our behalfs, because that trip to South Africa for me, as a Black man, as my first trip to Africa, and to be received by you and your people and by your family with that love, I don't think anything could ever top that. To find family and to be loved in that way, considering the disconnect after a certain point in my own ancestry, I don't think anything can top what that meant to me. So that one forever sits in my heart and in my head as the ultimate trip, the ultimate departure from everything that I knew. But I had a fantastic time in Colombia. Colombia's a great place. Bogota, Medellin, definitely left bits of my heart there for sure. Paris was amazing. I really respect the preservation of architecture and the vibe of Paris. You get the sense that multiple businesses and cities have turned down a bag that would have reshaped things to look a little bit more corporate and capitalist in favor of preserving a vibe and preserving history. And I respect that a lot about Paris. I've had a great time in Mexico. I could go on and on.
No cap, and I'm not lying. I think the UK might be one of my favorite cities in the world. It might not be my favorite country that I've visited to, but my favorite cities, I think London might have to be one of my favorite cities.
Yeah, London is a vibe for sure. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we're leaving out crazy. But yeah, man, get out there, travel. Yo, y'all let us know what some of your favorite countries, cities that you've ever been to are, so that we can build up our travel to-do list.
Let's do it, man. We got music to talk about. This is what these people come here for, man. We spend all this time trying to think about things to talk about. And then the most viewed part is this next part.
Hey, yo. Hip hop has a very special place in both of our hearts. It's been the music that I've listened to most since that first Walkman was in my hand. Those first cassettes were stumbled upon mom and pop's collection. And I don't know if that's ever going to change, but I will say that I see a change in hip hop. And I see a change in you, because I know that you.
What you mean?
Yeah, if not 50-50 rap R&B, it might be a little more R&B these days. which is cool, which
I
is
listen to a
refined.
lot of R&B. I listen
That's
to a
grown and
lot of
sexy,
R&B.
you know. Would you say that transition is official now? You a little more R&B than rap?
You know what's in is that if I have the time and the space to listen to music, like if I'm going to be listening to music throughout the day, then usually I will listen to more R&B s music. But if I don't have a lot of time to listen to music and the days are moving a lot quicker than usual, then it will definitely veer towards hip hop.
Mm. When you think about the projects that have affected you most over your lifetime and then in the last couple of years, uh, are those rap projects or R&B projects? And is the answer the same, lifetime versus last couple of years?
That's a great question, man. That's a great question. I think because the conversation for us is what's the most which rap album has been, the most impactful, and then leading us into what do we expect, which rap albums are we excited for the rest of the year. But when I think about it, I think Nipsey Hussle's Victory Lap might have the most profound effect on me, so much so that it's quietly sneaking into it's my top 5 favorite albums of all time, and is fighting constantly on a higher place. And I've had to really think about which albums I removed from that top 5, but Nipsey Hussle's Victory Lap, man, something, the album is named Victory Lap. The man passes away. That was his last album. He's it's nothing but game that the brother's splitting. It's life music. It's one of those things where I'll force my kid to love. I'll force my child to love that album.
Are there any R&B albums that hold a similar place in your heart in terms of defining and giving voice to your experience, but also giving you life and energy sonically? Are there R&B albums that are close to that for you?
Bosom.
One more again?
Erica Baduism.
Baduism. Okay.
Baduism.
I know
That
that. I know that.
that
That Anderson Paak Malibu is up there for you as well.
yes. But I wouldn't consider that R&B. I wouldn't consider that R&B.
Ah, interesting. Okay. All right.
Mm.
Um.
I wouldn't consider that R&B.
Yeah, man. There are some
What about you,
R&B
Dom?
projects. Yeah. Yep. I'm going there. There are some R&B projects that sit really, really highly with me. Um. But I actually, aside from Aaliyah's self-titled album, I don't know if there certainly aren't as many R&B albums that capture my experience the way that a Good Kid, Mad City does, or a um, Victory Lap, or a uh, I'm blanking on
Reasonable Doubt.
Reasonable Doubt. Thank you. Or The Cool by Lupe Fiasco. Right. For me, even as I find myself turning more to R&B for ambiance as I get older, the albums that I sit with that make me think are still mostly rap albums, with a few exceptions. That Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," Marvin Gaye's "Here My Dear." There are a
Mm-mm,
couple, right,
mm-mm.
R&B albums that really,
Donny Hathaway.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Um, but as I look toward kind of the future of hip hop and just the way that music is heading, I wonder if, and sometimes I feel like I have fewer earth shattering, self defining albums ahead of me than I do behind me. And that's no diss to
Word?
where hip hop is going. That's no diss to where music is going. But I don't feel myself, and I don't know if I can expect to as I get older. Maybe that's just a thing that happens more when you're younger. But I don't anticipate being blown away by that as much hip hop going forward as I have been in the past.
That's wild that you say that, considering that we've had albums like Stove God Cook's Reasonable Drought. You've had Benny the Butcher's breakout album, which was how am I blanking on the
Tana
track?
Talk 3.
But Tana Talk 3. Um, you've seen Good Kid, Mad City come out. Okay, but Good Kid, I guess, is a bit more, you know, that's what 10 years ago now. Damn, that's 9 years ago.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
crazy.
Um, so it's a decade. That's interesting that you say that to me. I think that future of hip hop is very, very bright. You look at what Rashad is doing. You look at what Staples has been able to put himself together as. You look what Tyler the Creator is doing from a visual audio perspective. You still looking at the Griselda Boys, Makami, Baldy James. Maybe the earth shattering elements of hip hop might not necessarily be there, but in terms of just like pure enjoyability, I'm actually very, very excited about the direction pop is going to. I think bars are coming back. I think artistry is coming back. I think integrity in music is coming back in hip hop, and it seems to me that there is a longing to get back to the roots of it. You're seeing what Jid has done. You're seeing what Joey Badass has been to put together. You're seeing what Mick Jenkins is doing. All of these, I think we have this might be it's like we're in the early days of a new evolution in hip, and I think hip hop's getting more intelligent and more artistic, and I love it.
Yeah, I think I disagree with that last point. I think your first point is spot on in terms of enjoyability. I don't think hip hop is slacking at all, right? Some of those albums you mentioned, for me, Benny, Plugs I Met Too, I can rinse that album over and over. Vince Staples, self-titled Vince Staples, with the exception of Mick Jenkins, though, I don't know if I feel like artistry and bars specifically, right? The ability to articulate a human experience within bars in a way that transports people to not somewhere abstract and creative, but still creative, but somewhere very real. Some taking you to somebody's block, bringing you within their home, within their circle of friends. With the exception of Mick Jenkins, I don't know if I see an artist being able to do that in the way that the artists that have meant the most to me have. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that a big part of that is growing older. But can you honestly tell me that you see the same limitless potential in and I'm not trying to diss anybody, but when I look at Kendrick, when I think about how I felt about Cole when Cole was coming out and kind of at his peak, when I think about some of those incredible artists, I don't know if I see these young artists. Can they create something as enjoyable? For sure. But can they create something as conceptually satisfying? I actually don't know.
I think you're tripping, bro. I think you're tripping because like seeing what Rashad is able to create. You're seeing what Mozzie is able to create. Maybe from the creative scope of it. Um, and a lot of these people are still in their early stages. There's always been a lot of fodder in hip hop. There's always like a lot of people that are just making noise. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of filler in hip hop. But what I definitely see is artists taking bigger risks when it comes to their creative output. I think you're seeing, again, rinsing back some of the names that we've said. Vince Staples again, right? If you're looking at even artists like Jay Huss and how they move into and how they're able to be so fluid with the sound, right? And like the borders of what hip hop has traditionally been has been broken down, and people are allowed to be a lot more fluid into it, which is why I think it's gonna have a a, a better prospect, because the concept of what a hip hop artist is no longer locked in. You're seeing some, even the consistency of our legacy acts. man. Look, Future has been able to do with his last album. Look at what Thug has been able to do. Look at what there's consistency that we're seeing, right? You know, that's why for me, I think the rules that have been bent in hip hop is what allows it to look so promising for me going into the future. Because Vince Staples damn near made 2 R&B albums, if you think.
Yeah. And I think Vince Staples and a lot of other artists will continue to have crazy success as they change hip hop and it becomes what it needs to be for this next generation, right? Every generation needs their music to say something different, to carry them in a different way. But again, when I think about, because I'm trying not to compare I'm trying not to compare artists that are older and more mature in what they've been able to create to what younger artists have been able to create. I'm trying to think about when some of the artists I think are the greatest of all time were in their 20s. What were they making? And does the artists that I see now, are they matching up to that? So when I think of a Big, when I think of a Ready to Die, when I think of a Life After Death, I don't really know of an artist that none of those guys can make enjoyable music, but can they make something like that? You know what I mean? When I think of Tupac, right, and how young Pac was, right? When I think of an All Eyes on Me, I don't see an artist that I think has an All Eyes on Me in them. I don't see an artist that has the Cool in them, right? And that's not to say that they won't make something beautiful and dynamic, but I guess I'm wondering who has who are the young artists. Like, I love Vince Staples projects, but I don't put Vince Staples or Ramona Park Broke My Heart on the same level as the Cool or as, right, like Machiavelli. So where is that going to come from? Where is that? I'm talking about earth shattering. I'm not talking about good music. I'm not talking about this is a vibe. I'm not talking about this pushes the boundaries. I'm talking about universally, this is it.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's because the machine of hip hop has changed, bro. The machine of hip hop has totally changed. You're talking about times where people have been where there were 4 or 5 studios, massive hip hop studios that were pushing out few artists at a time. When Pac and Big and even the Cool came out, it was the options of hip hop that you were limited to was either you could buy in a store or what you could or you have to be able to navigate the LimeWire, right? But if you couldn't do those things, then you almost had to be spoon fed your music. And I think because of the influx of music has just been flowing in, that's what makes things a lot harder for them to be able to stand out. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tells me that or ever story to them was like the Cool. I wouldn't be even more than that, dude. If we're talking about earth shattering, I think the earth shattering happens in smaller microcosms because you listen to what Black Odyssey is doing. Black Odyssey is incredible music, bro. That's incredible music. Even if you look at Malibu, right? To a reference that we've used before, and you look at what Malibu how Malibu is just received, right? And how acclaimed it is. It might not have shaken the ground, so to speak, but the quality of that song, the quality of those artists, they stand up. And we're speaking about. I think what we're noticing is maybe hip hop won't have these landmark earth shattering moments because it's got a shorter memory span. But if I'm looking at the future and I'm looking at what Dirk is doing, and I'm looking at what West Side is doing, and I'm looking at what Travis Scott is doing, I'm looking at what Don Tolliver is doing, I'm looking at what there's so much there's so much opportunity looking in front of. It's international too. You can go to your Nasty C, even your Maglera boy in South Africa. There's so much talent that's just swarming around.
I feel you, but I think a lot of the art, even the Black Odyssey, even the Malibu, I think we're getting away. Those albums are fantastic, but not because it's hip hop. You know what I mean? Because of the other elements that make those albums great, right? And the artistry that makes those albums great. But when you all those artists you named, and I'll go back to the first album you mentioned, Nipsey Hussle's Victory Lap. I don't know if I believe Don Toliver can make something that hits like Victory Lap hits for me. Can he make something that I love to hear out? Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't even think Victory Lap. I think Victory Lap was well respected when it came out, but I don't think it was earth shattering. I think Nip passed away shortly after the album came out, and it was like, you know, we ran back to it and appreciated it. But think about it this way: that year that Victory Lap came out, it was Victory Lap, and then it was Meek's album, right? Champions. Right, and the conversation about how neck and neck those two albums were is the conversation that we're having. Which one is better, Champions or Victory Lap? You said Champions too by then, right? So if Victory
You
Lap
did too. It's recorded.
I did not. I did not say
Yes,
Champions
you
is
did.
a better album than Victory
Yes,
Lap.
you did.
I did not say
Yeah, you
that,
did.
bro. I did not say
Yes,
that.
you
Don't
did,
do
bro.
that. Don't do that.
You did. You
But
did.
look, if okay, cool. I'll even take that example. Say that we both said Champions is a better album than Victory Lap, and now we're going back and we're having such a claim for Victory Lap. But look at how Champions aged, and we said that was a better album. Even though
I think it's
we
aged.
said that
I
was
think
a
it's
better
aged
album.
well, actually. I think Championships has aged
I think
well. But it's not.
aging
I
well
don't.
and being it's not ground shaking album. It's not a ground shaking album.
Sure.
Right? But it's a good
Yeah.
album. You
Yeah.
feel what I'm saying? So like, I
I
think
do.
there's great albums that can drop, but like, I don't think we can. I think it's hard to hit ground shaking anymore. I think that's what it is.
I feel you. But do you so I guess just to kind of clarify, you feel like some of those artists you mentioned, Future, Don Toliver, a lot of them are more melodic, which I think is interesting. Lil Durk. Do you think those artists, do you expect those artists to make something that, forget earth shattering for the culture? Who do you think can make a project that means as much to you as Victory Lap did?
Rashad.
Okay. I think Rashad and Mick Jenkins are the best. Would be my best bets. I've listened to a lot of Billy Woods. I've listened to a lot of Blue and Ono. I've listened to a lot of some of these underground artists that people are championing, and I respect their music a lot. But I guess at the heart of this conversation for me is, am I reaching a point in age where the artists that are coming out, I'm not able to relate to their music in a way that makes it a defining album for me in my life going forward? Or is hip hop just taking a different direction that is more melodic, that is more barrierless, that is more concerned with how it makes you, like the vibe, than what's actually being said, articulated, laid out, and you have to confront it? So I don't know. I guess I don't know.
Our producer's telling us we're running long in the teeth on this, and we can talk about hip hop ad nauseum, man. I think at the end of the day, Miles is getting old, and that's that's what this Miles is getting too old for hip hop. Yo, can we make that the episode of the show? Miles is too old for hip hop.
I don't think I'm the one who listens to more hip hop. I still enjoy and experience hip hop every day. I love it. But in terms of bodies of work, I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong, in that this new generation can make a body of work that is as undeniable as some of the projects that we've gotten from Kendrick, that we've gotten from Notorious, that we've gotten from Tupac. I would love to be shocked by this generation that can put out something that stands as undeniable like that.
I think if you're gonna keep looking for something that's unanimously undeniable and ground shaking, you're gonna miss it. But if you are looking for something that resonates deeply, I think that there's a whole host of that, and I think that we're gonna see a lot more of that coming up into hip hop. Shout out to Westside Boogie. Shout out to Todd.
I hope so, because we know.
Hey, thing We know. We know. What? Man, thank you for that, Miles. I needed that, dude. Thank you, producer. We know.
No doubt, man. We know people are going through it. People are looking for something earth-shattering, something meaningful, something moving. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering to be that. I don't think we're earth-shattering every week. I think in a lot of ways, sometimes we're trying to piece this whole earth global community thing back together, and we can't do that without the community that supports us. We can't do that without y'all. Y'all could be anywhere in the world listening to Don Tolliver, but instead y'all are tuned into us.
Hi,
and
Mama.
we appreciate that so much. This is a celebration of celebrating. This is a celebration of life. This is a celebration of disagreeing with love, and this is a celebration of how good it feels to listen to hip hop. Don't it feel good to me?
My mother also got a hole in one today. I wanted to congratulate her because I know she listened. She's my biggest fan. Love you, Mama. It feels great to be glad.
Yo, congrats. Keep applying that pressure on the golf course. We love to see it. We love to hear it. Shout out to Delonte, longtime listener. His birthday was yesterday. That's my guy. Shout out to the entire live family. You know what I'm saying? Eat something delicious. Hug somebody you love. Have a wonderful, safe, blessed weekend. Like that, we gone.
Yeah, I get that, but is we live though? Is